This podcast is sponsored by Quartz IP. For more than 20 years, the PracticeLink IP operations platform has helped some of the largest IP practices in the U.S. simplify and scale high-volume IP operations. PracticeLink is designed by IP teams for IP teams, bringing smart automation to mail intake, calendar management, and client communication while making sure service to your clients still feels personal. Learn how Quartz IP drives excellence in IP operations at quartzip.com.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to IPWatchdog Unleashed, where each week we journey into the world of intellectual property to discuss the laws, news, policy, and politics of innovation, technology, and creativity. With analysis and commentary from industry thought leaders and newsmakers from around the world, IPWatchdog Unleashed is hosted by world-renowned patent attorney and the founder of IPWatchdog.com, Gene Quinn, who has twice been named one of the most influential people in the intellectual property community and recognized numerous times as one of the top IP strategists in the world. Take it away, Gene.
Thanks, Renee, and welcome everyone to this week's edition of IPWatchdog Unleashed. This week, my guest is Rama Elluru, and she's Senior Advisor for the Special Competitive Studies Project, which is a bipartisan, nonprofit initiative which makes recommendations to strengthen America's long-term competitiveness for a future where AI and other emerging technologies reshape our national security, our economy, and our society. We're going to have a robust conversation about all of those things, but let me start by just thanking you, Rama, for joining us here today. I really appreciate you being here.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me here.
So before we jump into what we want to talk about, the AI, national security, innovation policy, which I know is what you're doing right here now today, let's dial it back a little bit because you actually started your career, or at least when I first got to know you, you were at the patent office, right?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So how did you get into intellectual property in the first place? And then also, how did you find yourself at the patent office?
So I actually came into intellectual property in a somewhat unconventional way. In college, I majored in computer science and philosophy. My philosophy concentration was epistemology, the study of knowledge and logic. And I think that also says a lot about how I approach problems today. My senior project back then was building a smart chess player. After college, I spent about a year writing embedded software tools for F-16s. It was technically interesting work, but after a year of sitting in a cubicle coding all day, I realized pretty quickly that it probably wasn't the right long-term fit for me personally. So I decided to accept a law school offer that I'd previously deferred. And then after law school, I did a few clerkships and also earned a master's degree in biochemistry and molecular biology because I was increasingly drawn to technology and interdisciplinary work. Then at some point, someone suggested I should look into patent law given my background. And I honestly hadn't considered it before then. But once I started exploring it, I became fascinated by the intersection of technology, law, innovation, and policy. I ended up clerking at both the ITC and the Federal Circuit, which really gave me a great look and insight into innovation disputes and tech competition and how it actually plays out institutionally. After that, I practiced at a couple of IP boutiques. And then when the America Invents Act went into effect, at the time, Chief Judge James Smith reached out and asked whether I'd be interested in serving as an administrative patent judge. I'll admit I hesitated at first. At the time, it wasn't entirely clear how much traction the AI proceedings would ultimately get or how significant they would become. But I did eventually join the USPTO as an APJ. Around the beginning of 2018, former Director Iancu and former Deputy Director Peter established an AI plus IP committee to look at the impact of AI on IP and see what changes needed to be made at the USPTO based on this new technology. At the time, we were contemplating RFIs on AI implications. Those RFIs were later issued. I think this is when I first started thinking about the impacts of AI on our systems. Issues like patentability of AI inventions, whether our IP system adequately incentivizes innovation in AI and related technology, questions like how AI IP policy was developing globally, and so on. And I think it became increasingly clear that AI and other emerging technologies weren't just commercial technologies anymore. They were becoming strategically important technologies for our national ambitions.
So there's a lot there that I want to dive into, but I want
Sure.
to go all the way back to did I hear you say you were writing code that was going to be used in F-16 fighter jets?
That's right. It was like testing tools that were embedded in F-16s.
Interesting, interesting. So, because I always wondered how you went from the patent office and an IP expert into the national security realm. I see the connection. I don't think a lot of people see the connection between IP and national security, which is why I wanted to talk to you today. But now it makes a little bit more sense. This is something that has been a part of your world for a very long time.
Yeah, it has. Like I said, I mean, my career's certainly taken turns and twists, but it revolves around technology and maybe even made full circle as far as coming back to software and AI. But yeah, I've seen technology from many different angles, from, being a technologist, from as a lawyer, and now doing national security policy.
You raised the question during your opening answer there about whether the patent system, US patent laws are appropriately incentivizing not just software, but AI specifically. What do you think the answer to that is? Have we got it right? Are we getting it wrong? Are we starting to get it right? Is there hope? Where do you fall into that spectrum?
I think it's a really complicated question because the technology is moving so fast and our rules and regulations move so slowly. I think where we are now, as far as like patent inventorship, AI enabled inventorship, I think it's working. But what happens when the technology advances even further? So now, we were talking about generative AI and using generative AI tools in the invention process. What happens when agentic AI, if agentic AI takes off? And by agentic AI, although I don't think there's really a consensus among technologists of what agentic AI means, but let's say it is autonomous capabilities. Right now, PTO guidance in the courts have said you need significant human contribution when an AI is involved. You have to name a human as an inventor, and they had to have made a significant contribution to conception. What happens when we have more autonomous capabilities? And for example, I think one of the let me step back a little. I think one of the areas where AI is really showing promise is in scientific discovery, for example, drug discovery, healthcare, et cetera. So what happens when you name a problem and say, "Hey, find me a solution to this specific cancer, be using this portfolio of molecules." And you have autonomous capabilities, that we already have AI-enabled simulation capabilities, AI-enabled lab capabilities. So what happens if this agentic AI, has all these bunch of agents that breaks down that problem and offers you a solution? And it's also done, some simulations to test the molecule on the cancer target. Is that enough human contribution to identify the problem? I mean, I know our guidance and law says it has to be significant contribution to conception, but in that case, has the AI also made a little bit of contribution to the consumption? I don't know. So I mean, I think this is sort of down the road, but I think those are the kind of challenges that we may be facing.
Yeah, I would agree that it's down the road. I don't see anything yet, at least that I've witnessed, that
Yeah, I
would
think that's right.
suggest that AI is ready to conceive. I think AI is really good at brainstorming with you and helping you put your thoughts into a stream that sometimes when you take a step back, you might think to yourself, wow, that is inventive. I didn't come up with that. I think that may be a little bit more of the imposter syndrome going on, where the AI is just reflecting. It's using a lot of information it has access to and is reflecting what you've put in and how you've directed it. But I can see a future, I don't know when, where the AI will be able to do more. And it seems to me that if we stick with the inventorship rules that we have right now, then there's going to be a whole lot of innovations that simply can't move forward because they're going to cost too much. If you can't own it, you're not going to be able to invest in it. I hope that we have our eye on that ball because I think that innovation could leap forward, and I'm afraid it might stall.
I think those are all great points. The first point you made about how right now we're using AI tools as a collaborator, as just you and I thinking, talking about, brainstorming about an innovation. And then we have the manufacturers to determine if we're both co-inventors. And in this case, no, I agree with the Patent and Trademark Office current guidance that says if collaborators are a human and an AI, manufacturers aren't relevant. You have to look at the contribution that's made by the human. I do think that's the right analysis right now. And I think that it is just a tool and it's collaboration. So I think our current frameworks address that question. But you're right. As these capabilities move forward, I think that the challenges that you raise are valid.
I think it's going to become a problem, maybe even sooner rather than later, because the AIs have seemed to move much faster than I thought that they were going to move. They mature much faster. Now, we still have some hallucination problems, not like we did. And we still have some problems with, I don't think the AI is really coded yet to get answers correct. They're still much more of a large language model than they are the all-knowing Star Trek computer. But having said that, I don't think I would have predicted 2 years ago that we would have come this far this fast.
And that's what all the technologists are saying too, that the acceleration rates are just growing. So it's hard to keep up with. And another point you made is what do we do when we have those capabilities? I think as far as like a competitive perspective, a global competitive framework, I do think other nations are also looking at this. Our adversaries are looking at these capabilities and what tweaks need to be done to their IP systems. And I think some nations, let's say China, might be looking to make sure that when AI does race forward with these capabilities, that they're still incentivizing innovation, that there's still mechanisms that are incentivizing humans to design, develop, and deploy these technologies. So I think the United States has to do the same. I don't know when that is, but I do think that we need to start thinking about those issues.
No kidding. There's a lot of issues I think we need to be thinking about. And sometimes I look at what's going on and I hear what some policymakers are saying, not to throw anybody under the bus. I mean, things are changing so fast, and this is not their only focus. I get that. But I think sometimes, like, have you ever watched science fiction? Maybe what we ought to do is start with setting the rules of the road by saying, look, AI systems can't harm humans, period, full stop. Like go back to Isaac Asimov's three
Right.
rules for
Yeah.
robots, and I don't hear enough people talking about that. And I wonder whether we'll start talking about that after it's too late. I hope not.
I think those conversations are happening now. I think that policymakers are understanding that we have to harness the benefits and make sure that the harms don't outweigh the benefits. So I do think policymakers are thinking about that. And, every new case of an AI capability like Mythos and its cyber capabilities, I think that does wake up policymakers and say, hey, here are the specific issues that we need to be talking about. I mean, we've said that can't put out regulatory frameworks before we understand the technology, but we're getting a better understanding of this technology now. We're getting a better understanding of the harm. So I think that there is more happening now than there was, let's say, last year.
Well, that's good to hear. So let me ask you this. Is this sort of what you spend your time doing and working on and consulting with policymakers about, or what is, I guess, a day in your life look like when you're trying to wrap your head around AI, innovation policy, and national security?
Yeah, it really depends on the day. Our mission, as you said at the beginning, is to provide recommendations for ensuring that America leads in AI leadership and other related technologies. So we are thinking about issues that come up. And as we said, technology is moving so fast. So the issues that we might be talking about last week will be very different from the issues that we're trying to grapple with this week. I have been leading a agentic AI task force, which consists of technologists that are actually building this stuff to have discussions about, well, what are the realistic capabilities? What are the realistic challenges, harms that this technology brings, for example, as compared to generative AI. What are the trends? What are the different milestones and timelines that we should be looking at? And that informs our other work as well. There's other parts of the organization that are working on, for example, workforce implications of AI. It really depends on the pressing issues of the time. So I think that right now, one of the issues that I'm grappling with is just sort of this techlash that we're seeing around AI. People have a very negative attitude towards AI because of its implications, for example, to the workforce, or because of data centers, or because what it could possibly do to the economy. So looking at those issues to see where we can help educate, increase awareness, and those types of issues.
So, what do you think is going to happen to the workforce? Do you think the workforce is going to be substantially cut back? It's going to be a real problem for people needing jobs? Or do you think this is like going to be like every other technology where that has been predicted, but then ultimately down the road, there's much more work to be had because the technology creates more opportunity and more work rather than takes work away?
Yeah, I think how you're describing is the case, but with any other technology that we've seen, there's a lot of pain at the beginning, and I think we're going through that pain right now. For example, with entry-level positions being harder to get from newly graduated college students, and people questioning where is the ROI and what is happening to human skills and which jobs are gonna be taken away. Those are the right questions that we should be asking. And there are tech leaders who are calling for the American people, the young generation especially, to get really involved in how we shape these technologies so that we can control how it affects our workforce, how it affects our job market, how it affects our economy. So we're humans. We created this technology. We can make sure that it is designed, developed, and deployed in the ways that benefits humans. But yes, we are going to go through some pain. And I think we can learn from other technologies in the past about how certain jobs are going to be eliminated or changed and how certain jobs are going to be created. But I have to point out, I think it's going to be a struggle in the near term.
Yeah, I could see that because I think there's going to require a fundamental transition of the skill set that is necessary to succeed in an AI economy. I think there will be for a very long time. I don't think we have to worry about robots becoming ditch diggers or construction workers or welders or any number of jobs where it really requires some blood, sweat, and tears in order to pull it off. Maybe eventually the robots will get to that point where that they have a lot more dexterity and so forth. But I mean, I don't see that coming too soon myself, based on what I've seen these robots capable or not capable of doing. But I do think that there's going to be some growing pains with respect to certain jobs, and skills are going to need to be ratcheted up in order to really succeed in the AI economy. I just had an experience this morning I can share with you. We have a problem with our thermostat, not
Mm.
sexy. It just happened, right? The
Uh-huh.
thermostat just broke, and I called the HVAC company to come out. And I got on the call and I thought for sure I was dealing with an AI agent, but the AI agent introduced themselves as a person and they sort of sounded like a person. The cadence were not necessarily smooth. So I was like wondering a little bit. And then it gets into this loop where I told it something and it just clearly it wasn't computing. That wasn't on its roster of possible responses or likely things somebody will say. And it's like, okay, I said, just let me talk to a real person. And then it put me through to a real person. But that's going to get better. And so a lot of those kinds of jobs, I think, are going to be the ones that are going to fall prey to the AI revolution. And I think it behooves people to get either real skills in, like Mike Rowe always talks about and is how America works, like the backbone of America, like the trades are, you got to get a skill as a trade, or you're going to have to go to school and become more educated to survive in this world. Would you agree with that?
I do. I have a couple of observations. I mean, we also need to figure out what to do with our K through 12 systems and, our college institutions about how we teach AI skills, how we integrate AI into the education system. So that takes some time. I think the newly graduated students from college probably didn't have the benefit of having that systemic integration of AI into their education from the very beginning of their studies. I think that will help, and I think we sort of need a feedback loop between the job market, the workforce, into education, say, "Hey, these are the kinds of skills students need to have when they're graduating high school, when they're graduating college." Another observation is I read this study recently. The premise was that a lot of these entry-level jobs can be done by AI, and a lot of AI jobs that can be done by AI are work-from-home jobs. But employers don't really want to hire young students for those kinds of work-from-home jobs because it's hard to mentor them, it's hard to teach them new skills when they're working from home compared to if it's around the water cooler and there's more face time, one-on-one time. I mean, I'm not saying that that study is true, but those are the kind of issues that we need to be understanding before we say, "Hey, can't have AI taking our jobs, and there's nothing we can do. We just have to stop AI."
Well, don't know that you could stop AI. I mean,
I
I
agree.
can't think of any technology that has ever once released has been able to be put back into the box. It's sort
Yeah,
of like the genie in the bottle. Once the genie's out, the genie is out, right?
agreed. I think the genie on AI is definitely out.
So I think the best that we can do, and I think we need to do this, and I do hope our policymakers and regulators and people in the agencies are moving very quickly. I think we can put guardrails around acceptable use. And then there have to, I think, be some long term, there has to be some real penalties around people who violate those guardrails, because we're not living in a world where we can tolerate the hackers or the ID thieves or what have you, and say, oh, it's a low level nuisance, which I don't particularly agree with that viewpoint. But I think if people are going to abuse AI, the harm could be gigantic. And I think we will have to have important guardrails around that and real penalties for people who violate that.
I think that's right. We certainly don't have any comprehensive AI laws in the United States. I think there's a lot of pending bills that speak to these types of issues. I do think it'll be a while before we have those types of laws that have massive punishments for unfair use of AI
So
or
let me
or nefarious uses of AI.
Yeah, that's the problem, the nefarious
Yeah.
uses, and we still don't have a real solution for dealing with counterfeiters and knockoff artists and ID thieves, and we just tolerate it on this very low level, and we play this whack-a-mole game, and I think we could do better there. I know we could do better there, and I hope that that mentality changes when we get to talk seriously about the nefarious uses that will come. We know they're going to come. They will come with AI. And we know it's going to come because with every new technology, there is all kinds of opportunity to scam and all kinds of criminal enterprises who are usually the first ones to push the envelope. And that is a little scary in this world, particularly you take in the ability of some of these AIs to, like I was just mentioning, sound like a real person. They can sound like a specific real person even. And that it should scare people.
I absolutely agree. In fact, over the weekend, I was talking to my mom, and we agreed on a code board. I said, "Hey, if I give you a call and start asking for money, you make sure it's me. And if you have any doubted that it's me, ask for the code word. And if I don't say it's not me." So I think AI-enabled fraud is probably one of the biggest challenges in the near term, as well as cyber hacking. There are groups around the world who are targeting rich countries like the United States and especially elderly people, vulnerable people, using very sophisticated AI-enabled fraud schemes.
And it's just they're opportunists. And I don't know where we're going to wind up falling out with all of this stuff, but it does strike me as something that we're going to have to really pay careful attention to getting right. I think people are going to have their own safety net here. I think a code word is very smart. I also think that if somebody calls you, let me get right back to you. I'll call you back. And then you can see if it was really them, and have these processes in place. And it shouldn't be that way, but I think it's gonna be that way, or it needs to be that way. And I don't know where this all winds up going, but So what other types of things do you think people ought to be trying to do for themselves? Because I think self-help here is going to be the first line of defense.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think you need to raise your awareness of AI. Maybe start using one of these tools, just experimenting, playing with it, trying to figure out how it can help you in your personal life, what you like about it, what you don't like about it, which uses you think it's helpful for, which tools from different providers that you like. Think different chatbots, different AI tools have different strengths and weaknesses, sort of figuring that out. I think is also useful. And maybe this technology isn't for you. And I think that's okay, but I think you need to be aware of it. And I think you need to be aware of its existence, how it's being used. AI has been around for a really long time. It's been on our iPhones. It's been helping make your Netflix recommendations. So I think being aware of AI's existence and how it's being used in the world, in your world, in your life, I think that is a great way to start understanding the technology so that your perspectives on AI aren't driven by hype or something someone tells you or something you read in a headline, but it is your personal experience of being familiar with AI.
I think AI obviously has been around for a long time, but I just feel like this version of AI is it's not your grandfather's AI.
No, no.
But the other thing here too is you said something like maybe this is just not for you and you ought not to use it. I think that there will be some of that, maybe even more of that than is ideal. And I'll give you a for instance. So like I probably like everybody, when you go to the doctor's office, for example, you have insurance, you give them the insurance, you have a copay, and then sometimes there winds up being a little extra balance. I guess it's because the insurance didn't cover as much as they had anticipated, or maybe they did a little bit more for you while you were there, or whatever it may be. So I'll get these text messages from doctor's offices saying you have a balance of $18 or you have a balance of 650 or whatever. It's never a large amount of money. It's always a little. I just refuse. I will not ever click on a link that somebody like that sends me. And I'm just never going to do it because it just always feels like it's a scam. Now, I think probably 9 times out of 10, it's not a scam, but I don't know that for sure. So I just wait and they'll send a bill or I'll go and the next time I go, I'll pay the balance or whatever it may be. So, but we have this, I think, otherwise what would be a very useful, easy to administer technology to collect money, send a text, send a payment, very quick, very clean. And because of fraud, I just am not going to use it. I suppose many people probably are the same way. And so I think the fraudsters, the scam artists, are ruining some very easy to use, streamlining and efficient technology. And I hope we don't allow that to happen with AI.
Great point. The same way AI can be used offensively can be used defensively. So I think we will also have these AI tools that help you figure out whether this is a scam or whether this is fraud or whether this is a genuine link that you should be clicking on. But that just takes time.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's certainly a fair point to make. You're always chasing the fraudsters, the con artists, the hackers, whatever, and dealing with it and over time. And like one of the things that I have noticed I find incredibly useful on my cell phone, you get a call from a number that you don't recognize. 9 times out of 10, it will say likely spam if I don't recognize the number, and I just click decline, and if it's not spam, they leave a message. And if they don't leave a message, then maybe they text me or email me and say, hey, I tried to call you. And okay, so now I return the call and I save that number and I know that's safe. But these are important mechanisms and procedures to keep in place. It's just good for people to know what's going on, what's out there. And if you hear of a scam, I always try and let the people around me know about it so that they don't fall prey to that sort of thing. But let me ask you this about the intersection between IP and national security, because we've been talking a lot about the technology and protecting yourself and so forth, but does the intersection of IP and national security, does the lack of connecting those two in the minds of many people surprise you? Because it surprises me that there's more people that don't see the inextricable link between the two.
I absolutely agree, and I faced this, the National Security Commission on AI. Just as a personal anecdote, I remember when I came in to talk to the executive director of NSC-AI, Ili Bairaktari, who's now the president of SCSP, and he had a very deep national security background. So he didn't really have the opportunity to be familiar with IP. So during that first meeting with him was my first IP meets national security moment. He was asking me questions like, well, what does the United States Patent and Trademark Office do? Why is IP important to technology? And we laugh about the moment now, but it took some serious convincing as to why someone with an IP background could be useful to NSCAI and why that had to be a pillar in the conversation about national security. One of the things I did was brought in some IP experts like former Director Yanku and former Judge Michelle to come brief NSCAI staff on IP and how it has changed our economy in the US. And I remember there was one incident in particular where former director Yanku came in and he started talking about the history of IP, starting with the World's Fair, and I think it was in 1896, and the battles between Tesla and Edison, and going all the way to the biotech battles between the United States and Europe. And that's when, it really clicked in a lot of people's mind about how IP is so important to our innovation and how innovation is very important to economy and how economy ties in with national security. I think the relationship between technology leadership and national powers has existed for decades, but NSCAI was one of the first major modern national security efforts to explicitly frame intellectual property policy itself a strategic national security issue in the context of AI and other emerging tech competition. I think it was historically, IP was loosely connected to innovation policy and economic policy and trade policy. But there was never a broad, integrated national security theory of IP itself. Even when policymakers discussed economic security, they often didn't place patents, IP incentives, implications of the patent eligibility doctrine, or standard setting into a unified strategic framework. And I think that's what Chapter 12 of the NSCA final report, which was all about intellectual property, I think that's what it made it so distinctive.
And it shocks me that there's not that connection made more readily apparent in the mind of people. I think even within our own community, the IP community, a lot of people don't make that connection. And I don't know why. I mean, it seems like you can't possibly turn on the news on any given day without hearing somebody talking about how Chinese companies or the government are stealing intellectual property. It's an issue, right? And people
I mean,
talk about it.
I think IP theft has always been connected as a economic and national security issue, but the broader IP policies, I don't think have.
Right. I think that that's right. But going back to like the theft issue, where I was going is it just seems like people, they throw it out there. Oh, yes, we got to do something about this. We got to stop it, and it's like, feels to me, and maybe this is unfair, but it feels to me like that's check a box. Some policymaker, member of Congress, agency head, whoever will say, yeah, this is an issue. This is a problem. We need to do something about it. And then you move on, and it doesn't capture the attention the way that I think that it should, because if other countries or other companies are stealing intellectual property, it puts them at a competitive advantage, because if they can take the innovation, they never had to invest in creating it. So the creator of that innovation is automatically, immediately at a competitive disadvantage. And that's not to say, like, if they're stealing stuff that is really truly national security, like it goes into an F-16, for example, like you talked about with some of the coding that you did, that clearly has a national security implication. But just economic security for companies, and we live in a global economy. So our companies here in the US are competing with companies all over the world. And often I think it feels like they're competing with their own technology. And that's not good for America. It's not good for American workers. It's not good for anybody. And I just guess I wish that there was more action taken.
Yeah, something you said earlier about why do policymakers have a hard time with IP and making the connection to national security? I think one reason is IP doesn't have a mass constituency. Inventors are a relatively small, diffuse group compared to, say, the healthcare constituency or the abortion constituency. I mean, I think a member of Congress can go an entire career without a single town hall question about Section 101 patent eligibility doctrine. So it's not a surprise that members allocate their attention elsewhere. And the subject matter itself is genuinely hard. IP is all at once technical, legal, economic, and strategic. The technology being patented could be very complex. Patent eligibility law is incredibly confusing. The economics of innovation incentives is really context specific. And members typically don't have training in this. So I think, and we've also Congress has lost a lot of technical capacity since the 90s. As you know, there are not many members who are truly interested in IP, and a couple of them are retiring. So I think that's a problem. And also, IP is scattered across committees. Judiciary has authority over IP statutes, and Commerce has oversight over USPTO. So there's no unifying congressional authority. There's also no forcing function. This is something that I've really learned in the national security environment. Defense gets the NDAA every year, and it's a guaranteed must-pass omnibus that forces members to engage with defense policy, whether they want to or not. And IP has no NDAA equivalent. There's no annual ritual that forces Congress to take an integrated view of IP policy. I also think it's hard for members to see the second and third order effects. Inventors quietly switching from patents to trade secrets.
Mhm.
AI startups choosing to incorporate in other nations instead of Delaware.
Yeah, I mean, how much of this do you think is also people just don't fundamentally believe that IP accounts for as much of the US GDP as it does? I mean, the last numbers that I've seen is about 40% of the total US GDP can be attributed to intellectual property. And I mean, we're talking about many trillions and trillions of dollars every year. And to me, that seems like that would be a big number that people would point to. I get that it's not going to get anybody any votes, but it's one of those things that if you really are serious about running the country and doing well for the people, I just wish it percolated higher on the radar for more members and policymakers. And maybe I'm just asking too much, but I do think people just don't fundamentally believe that truth and that that's the problem. What do you think?
I think that's certainly one of the issues. I think having these conversations about how IP affects our GDP and economics is really important to have. Those discussions need to be substantiated by data. And we need more IP champions on the Hill to look at these issues.
Yeah.
But it starts with conversation, it starts with data and advocacy.
So if you had one wish, I'm a genie and I'm going to grant you one wish and have it be related to IP, national security, AI, what it is that you do for your day job. What is that wish?
Can I have a couple wishes?
Yeah,
I
sure.
think
If there's more than one to go for it.
As with respect to IP and national security, I think our patent eligibility laws are still very confusing, and I think that needs to be fixed, and I think that's just gonna get murkier with AI inventions, both AI inventions themselves as well as AI-enabled inventions. I think that also patent inventorship is not an issue, as we discussed earlier, that's all said and done. So I think these are the kinds of issues that we need to be talking about, and I do think that IP policy should be as strategic in our national frameworks, just like foreign policy, diplomacy put out by the State Department or defense policy is so critical for our economy and national security. Other nations are doing it. China is doing it. China, for example, has said that IP is one of their levers in national security policy. They've done a lot of things to strengthen their IP systems. They have specific rules and regulations for addressing AI and its impact on the IP system. I think we need to be doing the same.
Well, great. Thanks a lot, Rama. That was a wonderful conversation. I hope you will come back and update us on what's going on.
Anytime.
Great.
Anytime, Gene. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to IP Watchdog Unleashed. We will be back next week, and we hope you will join us again. In the meantime, please be sure to visit IPWatchdog.com to read all the latest news and information about what is happening in the intellectual property world, and also be sure to subscribe to our free daily email newsletter.